Hi all, welcome to Sage Yoga. Today we're going to be doing a very different type of class than what I normally do. Today's a more lecture style class. You don't need to do any physical movement. You don't need to be in like a yoga area. You don't need a mat and that stuff. The only thing you're really going to need is a piece of paper or a notebook and a pen and a pencil, just for notes, and also because we will be doing a couple little quick write journal prompts. Nothing is required. You do not have to do the journal prompts if you do not want to. If you want to do one or you don't want to do the other, like, it's totally up to you. Nothing is required. There's no homework. There's nothing to turn in. It's just for your own personal development. But yeah, you don't have to turn anything into me. If you would like to share what you wrote, you are totally welcome to. And then if you want to write down any questions that you may have throughout this lecture, you are more than welcome to also reach out to me with those as well, and I'll be glad to answer them or discuss them with you. I don't know what your personal belief systems are. Obviously, a lot of people could be watching this. It's not live. I can't actually physically speak to you right now, but you do not have to be a Hindu or a Buddhist to learn about yoga and the yoga history and the philosophy, or to even practice yoga. Yes, you should understand where yoga came from, and you should understand the culture and respect it, but you don't necessarily have to be any certain religion to enjoy yoga. Even the Yoga Sutras state that a lot of these beliefs are for any religion. It's not, there's no set religion that it's for. It's just for personal development and betterment for the self. So there's one more thing that I like to do before we get started. I wanted to take a few moments of quiet meditation before we start. Nothing long, no like 15-minute meditation. It'll be just a few short breaths just to come into the now, be where we are, to breathe, maybe clear our mind of any preconceived notions of what yoga is. And then we'll get started. So find yourself a seat, however you would like to sit. If you're sitting in a chair, on the floor, or in your bed, you could choose to be cross-legged, or you could just keep your feet however is most comfortable for you. If you want to close your eyes, go ahead and feel free to do so. You can also leave them open. It's totally up to you. Just take a moment here. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose, out through your mouth. One more time, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. Awesome. Go ahead and blink your eyes open if they were closed. Take a moment to readjust to the light. It could be a little bright with all the lights I have. And if you feel ready, let's go ahead and get started. So today's class is a lecture on yoga philosophy and a brief yoga history as well. I do not cover everything in detail, nor do I probably cover everything there is to learn about yoga. This is a very brief overview of yoga philosophy and history, very brief. There is so much that could go into a class like this. Like, it could go for literally ever. Like, it's long. Like, people study yoga philosophy and this for their whole lives and are still learning. This is something that you will forever be learning. I'm still forever learning. There's so many things I don't know, and I'm constantly researching and learning. So yeah, this isn't everything. This is just a brief overview. This is like an intro to yoga philosophy, just touching on the key points, overview of everything, piquing your interest, and then I hope to have individual classes for each thing that we cover, and more, of course, to just like flesh it out a bit and broaden the horizons of what we learned. So without that all being said, first thing that we're going to cover is, what is yoga? So, like, what do you think of when you think of yoga personally? Do you think of an exercise? Do you think of a religious practice? And you don't need to answer it, but if you want, you could totally write it down. Just think in your head, like, what do you think of yoga? When you think of it, what do you think of? So yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root yuj. Yuj means to yoke and attach. It also means union or communion, the true union of our will with the will of God. So yes, there is a God in yoga, in Hinduism, in Buddhism. There is the belief of a divine being who created us. Yes, it's well known that Hinduism has a lot of gods, and it's similar with Buddhism, but there is also the divine, the ultimate being. But there is like the gods, the multiple, but there is like the one above everybody, the divine, the main God, the Almighty, the one who created all of us and the universe and everything. So yoga literally comes from the meaning of combining our will, what we want ourselves, with God. So this is the dictionary definition of yoga. It is a Hindu theistic philosophy that teaches the suppression of all activity of the body, mind, and will in order for the self to realize its distinction from them and attain liberation. So in Hinduism and in Buddhism as well, the idea of yoga is not just to combine our will with the will of God. So like that can have a lot of meanings, but what it literally means is that we're returning to God. We are God and we're trying to join back with him, which is the ultimate goal of Buddhism, is to stop reincarnating and to be able to stay with the divine. It's like a great feeling. It's the ultimate bliss. That's what enlightenment is. It's being able to combine ourselves with the Almighty again, with divine. So yoga teaches the suppression of ourselves as humans in order to attain liberation, enlightenment, in order to stop being human. Nowadays, yoga is now just a system of postures, physical postures, breathing techniques, and meditation. That's probably what most people think of when I ask, what do you think of yoga? You think of, asana or the yoga poses, maybe some pranayama, the breathing techniques, and then meditation, of course, which those are all yoga. Yes, those are all parts and pieces of yoga. But modern yoga is a very small portion of what it used to be. So there are actually tons of different types of yoga. There's Ashtanga yoga. So it's basically 6 series. You learn one series and you do it every day, every day, every day. And then when you master that series, you get to move on. Same set daily until you learn it, and then you move on. It's Mysore style, which means that the teacher does not necessarily teach you like in my classes, I will be doing the yoga with you and cueing you and telling you what to do. It is very different in Ashtanga yoga. Mysore style is basically the teacher just walks around and watches you as you do yoga. You need to remember the poses. You have to remember the steps. They'll step in occasionally if you need an adjustment or to correct you or to tell you like you did a good job. You get to move on to the next series. But overall, it is a very, you do this by yourself type of yoga. There's Bhakti yoga. It's less physical and much more spiritual. It is mostly a spiritual yoga. It is very close to what yoga used to be. It's known as the yoga of devotion because, again, it is very spiritual. It's about getting closer to God. That's the whole point. And they want you to achieve self-realization. It's not about hitting a pose. It's not about asana really at all. It's mostly a lot of meditation and self-study. There's then Hatha yoga. Originally was just any physical class. At one point, yoga was not a physical practice at all. So Hatha yoga was just any sort of physical class, any asana. They usually are slower moving classes, and it's about having longer holds in each pose and less like a flowing. So if you've been in a class where you hold a pose for like 30 seconds to a minute, maybe longer depending, that's more of a Hatha style. There's Japa yoga. It stems from the Sanskrit jap. It's a meditative mantra practice. So you've probably heard of japa meditation or japa mala beads, and that all bases around meditation. The goal is to communicate with the divine. So the whole idea of japa is to meditate, to go through the mantras, and to eventually be able to speak to the divine during your meditation. There's restorative classes, which are some of my favorite. It's a modern form of yoga. It's very modern. It's less about flexibility and strength, and it's focusing on relaxation. Most people really enjoy restorative classes because they're extremely relaxing. They're very chill. It's very nice, but it is a very modern form of yoga. And then there's vinyasa classes. It links breath with movement. It focuses on the postures and the transitions, and it starts slow and then it speeds up. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Sage Yoga teaches Hatha Vinyasa Yoga and restorative classes. So Hatha Vinyasa, what is that? So my yoga school, Authentic Movements, that I went to, their school is classified as Hatha Vinyasa, but they focus more on authentic movements. It's more of a flowy thing, but it basically combines both beautiful types of yoga. You know, there's long holds and less focusing on transitions, but in the same class, you can go from long holds to, no, we're going through this and we're focusing on the flowing. So it's very all over the place, but very fun. I enjoy it very much. And of course, restorative, because relaxing is awesome. So common yoga terms and what they mean. Namaste. You've probably heard this in your yoga classes at the end of the class. A greeting that originated in Hindu and Buddhist traditions. It means I honor the place in you in which the universe dwells. Obviously, inside of us, there is the universe that connects us to the divine. So it's basically saying the divine in me honors the divine in you. I see you type of thing. I see who you are inside. It's a very respectful way to speak to someone and be like, hello, goodbye. I see you. Then there's the prana. Prana is the Sanskrit word for life force or breath. Prana is the first fundamental unit of energy. So you probably have heard of pranayama. It's a breathing practice. It is very much believed that our breath is our very important unit of life. Obviously, it keeps us alive. Moksha is a Hindu term that refers to any form of liberation, release, or emancipation, especially from samsara. Samsara is the Buddhist term for our cycle of reincarnation that we are stuck in. It is the opposite of enlightenment, essentially. So moksha is the liberation from samsara and going towards enlightenment at that point. You finally are done with your cycle of reincarnation, rebirth, death, and rebirth. You're free of that. You're liberated. Samsara is the beginning and possibly endless cycle of birth, mundane experience, and dying again. It is considered dukkha, perpetrated by material desires, ignorance, and resulting karma. So that is what keeps us in this cycle of samsara, is sometimes karma from previous lives. Sometimes it's just our need for material desires, our material things, money, beauty, things like that. It keeps us in this cycle until we understand that it's not necessary for happiness. Dukkha is a Buddhist concept, suffering, pain, unsatisfaction. So that explains some of the samsara a bit. And then there's sukha, happiness, pleasure, ease, bliss. It's a transient state of lasting happiness and beingness. So let's go over a brief history of yoga. Yoga in many different forms has developed thousands of years ago across several cultures, including Indian, Chinese, Mayan, and Tibetan. Yoga practices were passed down verbally from master to student until Patanjali documented the sutras. Yoga eras. So there are many different eras of yoga. There's the Vedic era. The first appearance of the word yoga is in the Vedas. It's a sacred Indian scripture broken down into 4 hymns. Vedic yoga is connected to ritual and spirituality, and the main goal was to experience a vision and transcend reality. There's no mention of yoga asana at this point in yoga. So when yoga first is mentioned in the Vedic era, it is just about transcending our reality. It's about moving beyond. There's no yoga asana whatsoever. This was probably about 3000 BCE, but there's no definite dates. A lot of this stuff can't be dated. It's like there's such wide gaps, and it all depends on who's researching it and where you've found your research and where you learned it from personally. So then there's the pre-classical era. 2 important works come out at this time. It's the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. I always mess up when I say that. The yoga was then defined as a steady control of the senses, which can lead to a supreme state. So it goes from, transcending reality to being able to control yourself so much that your body basically is like, okay, enlightenment, you know? Then we have the classical era. It centers around the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which document the foundation of yoga as we know today. So the classical era is when the more modern version of yoga starts to arise. So this is the first inkling of the type of yoga that we tend to practice today. The sutras outline the eight-limbed path and focused on a dualistic approach to understanding our mind from spirit. We'll go over more about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras later, so just keep that in mind. And then we have the post-classical era. The Puranas, a collection of history, mythology, and philosophy, make way for the development of tantric yoga and chakra exploration. Now, important to note, I'm not going to go into detail about tantric yoga, but I know that most people think of tantric yoga as like the sex yoga. It's not wrong, but it's not right. It's not centered around sex. It has been heavily sexualized. Tantra is more about getting in touch with your own body and your own energy, which can have a sexual nature to it, but that was not the whole purpose. It actually has a real belief and meaning. So tantric yoga actually is what brought forward the belief of the koshas and the chakras. So it's about getting more in touch with what's inside of us. And we will go over koshas and chakras later. So if you don't know what that means, it's totally okay. We will learn about it. In this era, it's very important to notice, in this era, the British colonized India, and during the colonization of India is when yoga asana becomes prominent. Keep that in mind, in the back of your mind, write that down, whatever, just keep that in your head because we will be going over this in detail much later in this lecture. But that's just a little hint to yoga asana really comes into at this point in history. So now we're into the modern era of yoga, which is now. Swami Vivekananda brought his teachings to Chicago in 1893. Hinduism and yoga began to boom as international travel increased, especially in the US during the 60s and the 80s. So yoga has been here for a minute. Since 1893 is when I believe they say the first time that the Western world really got a taste of what yoga was. But yoga didn't really boom here until the 60s and the 80s. And currently it is going through another big boom. It has had a new rise in popularity that started at the turn of this century. This era, the modern era, combines traditional teachings with new schools of thought, but all paths of yoga are inspired by an ancient sacred tradition that has led countless masters and their students to the path of enlightenment. So yes, modern yoga is a very, 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 very different than traditional yoga, but it all comes from the same place, all of it. So here's our first 5-minute journal quick write. Grab your pen, grab your paper or your notebook. Go ahead, if you have a phone or a timer near you, set a 5-minute timer, and you could pause this video while you do your writing. And then I'll show you the prompts. So the prompt for this one is, what does yoga mean to you? So take 5 minutes to yourself, write what yoga means to you, and then you can, if you want to do it, go ahead, pause and do it. If you're not interested in doing this quick write, then we will continue on right now. So enjoy your writing if you choose to do so. So now let's get a little bit into yoga philosophy. We're going to go over the Om, the meaning and the breakdown of it, the 3 gunas, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and the 8 limbs. So Om, what does it mean? Most people know this symbol. You know of Om. You may not know exactly what it is, but you recognize it. You've seen it. Maybe you've seen this, but you didn't know what it said. It's Om. Om is the manifestation of the vibration of the universe. And when we chant it, we are connecting to the universe. It is a reflection of absolute reality. Om embraces all that exists without beginning or end. The Om vibration began with the creation of the universe, and chanting it helps us tap into that vibration and powers of creation. So it is believed, it is Indian belief that God first created sound and that the universe rose from it. So it is believed that the divine made sound first, and that the first sound was Om. It was the manifestation of the vibration of the universe. And in this belief, vibrations make up everything, which is probably where you hear constantly good vibes only, good vibes, bad vibes. It's vibrations. And it comes from this, that everything in our universe is made of vibrations. Vibration, weirdly enough, is sound. So when you make Om, it's a sound, and a sound is a vibration. And when we chant it or we say it, we are connecting ourselves to the universe. So what does a reflection of absolute reality mean? Like, a lot of this probably is sort of confusing. Understandably, it's a lot of very abstract ideas. The idea is absolute reality has no beginning and it has no end. Every beginning is an ending and every ending is a beginning. It's a forever. It is said that this sound is always in the background of our universe, and that if you listen hard enough in meditation, that you could hear it. Very interesting, right? So let's get into the breakdown of the Om symbol. Each part of the Om symbol actually has a different meaning. So we'll go over first Jagrat. It symbolizes the waking state. It is this lower curve. I've labeled it for you, this lower curve. It is our waking state. The upper curve is Sushupti. It symbolizes the state of deep sleep. The first part is Jagrat. It's the large lower curve on the bottom that I've labeled, and it symbolizes our waking state. In this state, the consciousness is turned outwards through the gates of our senses. So meaning it's when we're awake and we're not looking inwards toward ourselves, we're focused on what we're looking at outwards, what our senses are bringing in, essentially. The larger size of it, so it's so wide and big and a huge curve on the bottom, it symbolizes that this is our most common state of human consciousness. So this is where we almost always are. When we're awake, we are always outwardly looking, because of course we are. We need to see where we're going, we need to see what's happening, but we don't spend 99% of our time meditating. So this is our most common state of being, is in Jagrat. The upper curve is Sushupti. It symbolizes the state of deep sleep, or our unconscious state. It's when we're asleep, essentially. This is the state where the sleeper desires nothing or beholds any dream. So this is at the point where we don't want anything, we don't need anything, we are passed out, we're not even dreaming, we are just asleep. We're just dead to the world at this point. The middle curve is Svapna. It symbolizes when you are between deep sleep and the waking state. This is our dream state. So this is when we're dreaming. In this state, our consciousness is turned inwards. The semicircle is Maya. It separates the dot from the other three curves. The illusion is that Maya prevents us from realizing the highest state of bliss, Turiya. Maya itself is literally an illusion. It's like a veil, is another good word for it. It's a veil that keeps us from Turiya, or the ultimate bliss. The dot is Turiya, and it symbolizes the fourth stage of consciousness, the highest state of bliss and the ultimate aim of all spiritual activity. So Turiya symbolizes enlightenment. And if you look at the Om symbol, Sushupti, Jagrat, and Svapna are all underneath Maya. Maya is shielding us from seeing Turiya. So we'll move on now to the three gunas. Guna is translated as a quality, although directly it means rope or string. So like a quality as in who we are, like a personality, essentially. It was developed by the Sankhya school of Hindu philosophy. The gunas are made from the interaction of the Prakriti and the Purusha. It is the quality that things are made of. So almost like a recipe. That's the metaphor we're going with. It's like a recipe for a human personality. There are only 3 ingredients, and the outcome varies drastically depending on the amount of each ingredient that is added. These are viewed as human characteristics, our tendencies, and our modes of operation. So the gunas come down to, there's 3 core personalities for a human, and you can change the amounts that each human has. It's like, do you know that meme? Oh, I should have put that meme in. You know that meme of God, and he's standing over a bowl, and like they'll label like wittiness or assholeness, and then they pour it and he's like, oops, it broke. That's what the gunas are essentially. It's like God stood over a bowl and was like, you get this much, you get this much, and then, oh, that's a whole lot of that one. And it creates each individual person and their personalities. So the first one is rajas. It is the creations, hankering, attachment, energetic movement, passion, power, restlessness, anger, confusion. This is where creativity manifests. So this guna, the personality traits behind it are these things. So the wanting to create, the hankering to do something, the attachment to things. It's our energetic movement, being hyper and excited, our passion to want to create, power, restlessness, anger. All of those things feed into a type of wanting to create and being a creative. The next one is tamas. It is destruction, chaotic power, predominance, stillness, laziness, ignorance, delusion, disinterest, inertia, dullness, lethargy, sleep. This is the negative, nobody wants personality traits. Everybody's going to have them a little bit, but the idea is you want to lessen them as much as you can. So this is where people are mean and angry and causing chaos and lazy and sleeping all the time type of stuff. It is the disinclination toward constructive activity. So it's like the complete opposite of rajas. Rajas is about being creative and having creative energy, and tamas is, no, I ain't creating nothing, I don't care type attitude. Then there's sattva. It is peace, serenity, calm, self-preservation, tranquility, peace, wisdom, detachment, and happiness. Peacefulness manifests here. This is peacefulness. This is the ability to be calm and find inner happiness and inner peace. So now we'll move on to the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which we kind of started to cover just very slightly. Now we're going to get into it a little bit more. So the sutras are seen as one of the most important texts in Hinduism, and they are inherently a theistic text. So inherently, yes, the Yoga Sutras are a Hindu text. It is Hindu religion, but the sutras also specifically state that it is not prioritizing a specific deity or worship like most Hindu scriptures. So this specific Hindu text states, this is not just for Hindus, this is not just for one specific Hindu god, this is for any. It can be applied and reformatted to fit multiple religions and any belief systems. The root function of these sutras are to teach us about ourselves, self-study, and how to function as human beings. So this is like personal development, essentially. The Yoga Sutras are broken down into 4 chapters: meditative absorption, the practice, mystic powers, and absolute independence. So we'll start with the first chapter, is meditative absorption. Prathama Samadhi Pada. Yoga is defined here, with various types of samadhi are explained. The concept of Siddha Vritti is introduced in this chapter as well. So, first chapter of the Yoga Sutra explains yoga a little bit, it defines it, and then it talks about samadhis. The concept of Siddha Vritti is introduced, and that means it's to identify the patterns of consciousness and the activity of your mind. That's what Siddha Vritti is. It's to start to study your mind and to realize the patterns that you follow and your behavior. So then the next chapter is the practice, Divitya Sandhana Pada. This chapter focuses on the practice itself. So the practice of yoga, not necessarily asana, the practice of actual yoga and all that it combines with, and the various obstacles and fruits that comes from it. So fruit is like gifts, essentially. It covers the 5 kleshas, which are the obstacles we face that prohibit us from the practice. There are things that keep us from practicing yoga. Now, again, if you think of yoga as only an exercise, you can't keep me from practicing. You're right. You can't stop anybody from doing a sauna. Nothing stops you from doing a sauna. What they're talking about is actual yoga, which is a rigorous self-study. We'll get into the kleshas now. Avidya, which is ignorance. Not stupidity, it's ignorance. It's straight up being ignorant to wanting to see any sort of truth, wanting to learn any of that. That obviously would stop you from practicing yoga because you would have to learn about yourself. There's asmita, which is egoism. You cannot practice yoga with an ego. You cannot better yourself. You cannot study yourself seriously if you think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not possible. You have to be realistic and be able to see that there are flaws and there are things wrong and that flaws are okay, but you need to work on them. There is raga, which is attachment. Attachments are forbidden, I guess you could say. Attachments. You're not supposed to be attached to anything in yoga. Of course, there are people and things that you are attached to. I am highly attached to my daughter. I am highly attached to a stuffed seal I've had since I was 6 months old. We are attached to a lot of things. But severe attachment to the point where you can't free yourself of these bonds. And I'm not saying like free yourself of your child, like that's weird. But the whole point of yoga is we're moving towards death and essentially towards not being reborn. And we have to not be so attached to our earthly possessions and our earthly loves and things that we could leave the earth and be okay. So it's not necessarily like everyday attachment, like I love my daughter and I want her to be around, or I want her to be okay, or I want to keep my daughter. Those are healthy attachments that you probably should have as a human being. But if you are so attached to your child that you want to keep coming back to this world, to keep having that same child, you will continue the rebirth cycle. And there's nothing wrong with continuing it if you choose it, but that's just something that keeps you from practicing yoga effectively. Then there's dvesha, anger. Now this one's weird for me because I believe anger is a true emotion that is necessary in life, but there becomes a time when too much anger is too much anger. Healthy anger is acknowledging that emotion, getting through that emotion, or solving the problem that caused that emotion. If you're angry because someone's treating you badly, there are steps that you could take to either minimize your anger for the situation or to cut that situation out. So yes, anger keeps you from practicing. You need to be able to release anger in a healthy way and not hold on to it as much. And the final one is ahani vesha, clinging to life. So like that's what I just was talking about with the attachment. If you are so attached to your life that you can't think of dying one day, like you don't have to die tomorrow, but we're all gonna die. We don't know when, we don't know how, but we're gonna die. It's an unavoidable fact of life. And if we are so clung to our life that we want to keep coming back, we're never going to practice yoga effectively because we're never going to get to that point where we could leave and move on. We can't leave the wheel at any point because we're so stuck. So moving on to the next sutra is mystic powers, Tritiya Vibhuti Pada. This chapter clarifies the last 2 limbs of yoga. So throughout all the sutras, they slowly go through all of the limbs. We're not specifying each one right now because this is not an in-depth yoga sutra lecture, but throughout all of the other chapters, it starts to go through it. And this one clarifies the last 2 limbs, which is dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, awareness. Awareness and meditation are the last 2 limbs because that is the point when you have done all of the other work. But it goes more to that. What do you mean? What does mystic powers mean, right? If you work on yourself, you work on your attachment, you work on your egoism, you work on your anger, you work on all of that. You self-study. You get to this point where the veil starts to lift, is kind of what it gets down to. The veil starts to lift, that Maya. And you start to be able to do things that maybe people can't do, or that a lot of people don't believe in. And I'm not saying this is true. You don't have to believe in any of this. This is just what the Yoga Sutras say. But they're saying that essentially you can have knowledge of the future, or you can see your past lives, or into others' minds, stuff like that. You can see solar system stars. And this actually tracks because in Buddhism, there is this saying that anything you want to learn can be learned within through meditation. So a lot of early Buddhists and the Buddha, for example, they knew a lot of scientific facts that maybe weren't easy to prove, and they're not really scientists, right? They weren't doing experiments in their temples. I mean, they probably were, but not like into the extent that we think of experiments. They were going within themselves and meditating and then coming out with this knowledge. So they say that everything we need to know is within us. And it's a very true fact. You need to, it could take 20 years of meditation, but you could start learning things maybe. We'll move on. So as I said, Samyaya becomes fundamental in this chapter, and the practice of it leads to supernatural abilities. Pretty cool. The last chapter is absolute independence, Chaturtha Kaivala Pada. It talks about issues and relevance of Kaivala, which is liberation. And ultimate liberation is what we're going towards, obviously. And this is when the gunas return to their original state and the most essential nature. It's at this point where we're able to meditate and be aware of our life and aware of what we've been through and look at it from a different lens, that we're able to then not let these experiences affect us so heavily and allow our gunas to go back to a more natural state of being, not so heightened in one or the other, but maybe a little more even. They're all going to exist because they're all parts of human. No matter what we learn in yoga, the biggest thing that you have to remember is we are still human beings having a human experience. No matter how much yoga you do, no matter how much meditation, no matter how many mystic powers you have, no matter how much aware you are of your gunas and where they're at, you are a human person having a human experience. We are not a part of the divine anymore. We are separated from them, and we are living our own lives. We want to get to this absolute independence, obviously, but until we die and release this cycle and rejoin the divine, we are humans having a human experience, and we cannot stop that. We are going to have bad personality traits. Nobody's perfect, and yoga is not expecting anybody to be perfect, but to just know themselves and to be able to understand themselves fully. So now let's get into the actual 8 limbs, which are taught in the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras basically is a book that writes about the 8 limbs, and it all comes from Patanjali. So Patanjali created an 8-fold path to liberation, which he called the 8 limbs of yoga. These limbs are like steps, a blossoming and a growth that creates the foundation for the next limb to occur and flourish. So it's called the 8 limbs because it's like a tree. You have the root, you have the trunk, you have the branches that reach out, you have the leaves and the fruit that grows on it. It all is like a metaphor in a way. And when I do a class on the 8 limbs, we'll go super deep into this metaphor. So the yamas is the first. It's like the root. It's our self-restraints, our ethical standards, and our personal sense of integrity. Then there's the niyamas. It's our self-disciplines and our spiritual observances. So we'll go into detail about the yamas and niyamas later, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. We'll move on. Asana. I'm going to point out now that asana in the Yoga Sutras is not the same as asana as we think of now. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to point out that this is not at all what we think of as asana or postural yoga. So asana, posture, to help ease the chatter of the mind, develop the habit of discipline and ability to concentrate. Asana was more seated postures, being able to sit up straight, comfortable, and stay seated still throughout pain, discomfort, and be able to focus on our meditation or whatever we're doing self-study wise. Then there's pranayama. It's our relationship to prana, our life force, through breathing techniques and practices. If you've taken any of my classes, you've probably heard me talk about pranayama, especially if you took my meditation class. It's basically just the practice of breathing. And there are so many pranayama practices. I would love to do a whole class on pranayama practices, which I probably will. But it's just basically our relationship to our breath. Pratyahara, it is withdrawal from the bodily senses and a conscious awareness of how we use them. So basically, pratyahara is like, imagine your kids doing something annoying. If you have kids, or your dog or your pet, or just your significant other, your sister, your brother, your sibling, someone's being annoying next to you and you're trying to focus and you just keep hearing them, and you're just like, dude, if you could just shut up, you know? You can't always say that though, right? So sometimes we've learned, like as a parent myself, I've learned to block out my kid if she's being obnoxious. I learned to block her out, withdrawal of that sense, and being aware that I can do that, you know, not always, but it's a starting to understand that I can withdraw that for a temporary amount of time, for a little bit, you know. The next one is dharana. It is single pointed focus, intense concentration, and steadying of our mind. This is the beginning of meditation. So a lot of people jump into meditation like, I'm going to sit for an hour silent, or I'm going to sit for 30 minutes silent. And then they're like, it's hard and I can't do that. And it's like, I mean, some people can, and y'all are superheroes, but a lot of people can't. And it's understandable. There are steps to this. You know, our mind, in order to ease our mind chatter, we have to go through all of these steps, all of them. Every single one of these steps is what makes it easier for us to be able to get to the point of super silent, steady meditation. So this is like the start of meditation, being able to focus on one thing. So when I started meditating seriously, that's why there's a lot of guided meditations, like focus on a beautiful place that you've been. Or another meditation practice that I like to do is counting. You try to count to 10 without having a thought. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get there. You're going to get to like 3 and you're going to think, oh, I'm hungry, or, oh, I forgot to do this. And that's okay. We're working toward the point of not having those thoughts. So this is like the first start where you're trying to focus on one thing in your mind. You're not just letting feelers out. You're not just not thinking of anything. You're thinking of one specific thing, and you're trying your hardest to stay on that one thought, one focus. And then there's dhyana, which is a meditation with uninterrupted flow of concentration. So this is literally like meditation. This is real meditation where you're able to maybe sit in silence and just let whatever comes into your head just leaves automatically without you ever breaking your flow of concentration, without actually fully thinking it. It's just releasing yourself and just allowing whatever happens to happen. And the final one is samadhi, which is realizing our profound connection to the divine. This is a version of enlightenment. Clearly, you're not fully enlightened because you haven't left the earth and you have not rejoined with the divine, but it's realizing that you have a connection to the divine. It's maybe being able to talk to the divine, maybe meditating on them, type of thing. So this would be the final limb of the 8 limbs. So further, we're going now into the yamas and the niyamas, because the yama and the niyamas, there's 5 of each. They go into detail. So we're going to cover those. So the 5 yamas. So the first yama is ahisma, non-harming, which means you don't harm. Maybe you're a vegan, you refuse to harm animals, you don't hit people, you don't get in fights, you don't hurt anybody or anything. You don't hurt bugs, you don't hurt things, you don't break rocks, you don't cut down trees for no reason. You are respectful of all living things and you don't want to purposely harm anything. There's satya, which is truthfulness. You don't lie. Yes, there are times in your life where you probably lie, whether if it's for your safety or little white lies. Yes, everyone lies, let's be honest. But it's working towards being as truthful as you possibly can. Asteya, non-stealing. We don't steal ideas, cultures, things, people, things from people. We don't steal. The next one is brahmacharya, energy moderation. So specifically, this means literally walking in the way of God or the divine. It's saying that we should not be urge driven, that we should not put all of our energy into feeding our urges, whether that be food, violence, sex. That's not saying don't eat. It's not saying don't have sex. It is saying maybe don't be such a violent person. But these are things that are specifically human nature, which again, we are human beings having a human experience. We cannot deny our complete human nature, but you can be aware of it and try to maybe lessen some of these urge-driven things. The next one is aparigraha, non-grasping, non-hoarding. Non-grasping, non-hoarding. I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. It's not being selfish. Do not take more than you need. Food, homes, money. If you don't need it, you don't need to hold on to it. It's also being able to think, am I doing this out of fear, or am I doing this out of greed, or am I doing this because it's something I actually need? We actually need food, you know, we actually need air, we need shelter. There are basic things that humans need, yes. But do you need an overabundance of every single thing? No, you don't. And yes, sometimes the want for the overabundance is maybe out of fear. Maybe you grew up poor, like I did, and you feel like having a lot of money will essentially make you happy and take away that fear. And then there's the other side. Are you doing it because you're being greedy, because you don't want anyone else to have it, because you think you deserve more than everybody else? And that's definitely something that you need to work on, that there's more than enough for everybody. Just the greedy people need to not be so greedy. So I'll move on to the niyamas. The first niyama is saucha, or cleanliness. So that is, there's like multiple things to it. Yes, it's being a clean person, taking a shower, cleaning yourselves, taking care of yourself. It's also being aware of your gross body, which is this thing, the outside body. We'll go into detail about the difference between gross body and other things later. It's not saying your body is gross. It's just saying like it's a physical thing. It's the gross body. And being aware of it and what it needs. It needs to be cleaned. It needs to be taken care of. Also, lessening our attachment to perfection. So you shouldn't worry about looking perfect, sounding perfect, being perfect. No one is perfect. No matter how much we abide by these 8 limbs, no matter how much we try to attain perfection, there is no such thing. We are human beings having a human experience. We are not perfect, and that is okay. And that is also part of Sacha, is releasing that. We are going to be clean people, live in clean spaces, keep the universe clean, the environment clean. It means a lot of things in cleanliness, but it's also not achieving perfection, because you will not. You will always be wishing for more and more and more perfection. Next one is santosha, or contentment. It's living life on life's terms, essentially. Things are going to happen to you that we can't stop. There's just nothing that we can do about it. It's life. We have no control, really. I know we like the feeling of thinking we're in control, but we aren't. You're going to be given lessons and trials in life, and you have to continue through life and be happy regardless of the trials that you're put through. It's also not forcing constant positivity. So yes, I say to be content throughout your life, but you're going to have times in your life where things just aren't great, where you're not happy, and you can't force yourself to see the positive side of it. So there's always duality in these things, especially in this one with contentment. Yes, you should be happy with what you have, but it's also acceptable to realize what you are lacking and to be unhappy about that, and to take the steps to maybe make it a little better for yourself. It's also being kind when stuck. So being kind to yourself when you're stuck, being kind to others when they're stuck. It's life. We get stuck sometimes in one spot on the same lesson over and over, learning it. And it's being kind, even if you are worn out, even if you are tired, you're exhausted, you can't handle it no more. It's still being kind, because other people deserve kindness, always. Tapas, self-discipline. This is a fun one. because a lot of people are lacking this. But it's very self-explanatory. Self-discipline. You have to have discipline for the self, for yourself. You have to be able to tell yourself that was inappropriate and I should not have done that. Especially as an adult, you can't expect people to tell you that you're acting wrong. You can't. You have to be an adult and be able to see that that was not appropriate behavior and I need to rectify it. I need to fix it. I need to change it. It's your willingness to do the work because it has to be done. That's a good one to realize. I teach my daughter this very often. There are not always rewards for hard work. 9 times out of 10, there really is not rewards for doing the right thing. You know, you find $100 bill on the ground. Do you pick it up and steal it? Maybe. Do you go turn it in somewhere? Maybe, and that's like even more like, whatever. You find someone's wallet on the ground full of money, 100 grand in there. They just went to the bank. Maybe they were buying something they don't really need. What do you do with that? Do you keep it? I mean, if you keep it, are you going to get caught? How would they know? You could just return their wallet to them, but keep the money and just say, I found it like this. There are plenty of things you could easily do and probably get away with in like real life. But you have to have self-discipline to know, you know, I may not even be rewarded for this, but I'm going to give him his money back. I'm going to give the wallet back. I'm not going to steal, because that would, it would break one of the yamas, because you were lying and stealing and you're harming someone potentially. What if that person's $100,000 was like their life savings? I know that's like a big amount of money and that's probably not realistic, but imagine someone like had their life savings on them and dropped it with their wallet, and then you just took off with it thinking, well, they don't need the money and I do. Well, maybe they did. Maybe that money was going to buy them a car or their groceries for the week, and they have nothing else without it. We don't know other people's situations and we can't assume. So you have to be disciplined enough to do the right thing, even if it seems that we won't get in trouble for doing the wrong thing. And like I said, I teach my daughter this. You have to do your chores every day. Is there a reward? No. You just have to do it because it's part of life. And we have to have the discipline enough to do these things because we should, you know, move on. So this one is one of my favorite. You probably heard me say a version of this. Self-study. Svadyaya. Svadyaya is self-study. That is what all of this is about. Hugely. It's studying ourselves. We have to seriously get down into our being and what we think and how we feel and why we feel it, and studying why we do it. It is severe self-observation, but without extreme judgment. Because even if we're doing things that are wrong and we are doing things that we need to change, we're humans having a human experience, like I keep saying, and we cannot necessarily hold it against ourselves for giving into our human nature. We all make mistakes. We all are imperfect beings. So we just have to be able to study ourselves and be kind to ourselves. Like, you know, when your kid is learning something new and they make a mistake, the idea is not to get mad at them easily. Like, if your kid's learning how to sweep and they drop the broom, are you going to yell at them? No, they didn't do anything wrong. So it's like us, we're learning. We may make mistakes. You shouldn't beat yourself up for it. What you should do is acknowledge the mistake was made and make a plan to stop doing that maybe. So it's being not angry at yourself for making mistakes. It's not necessarily punishing yourself for making mistakes, but it's accepting that I've made mistakes. I've done things I should not have. I'm not going to beat myself up for it. But I am going to change and I'm going to do better and I'm going to acknowledge my mistakes. I'm not going to pretend they didn't happen. I'm not going to try to justify them. I'm going to say I messed up and I'm going to fix it. And finally, Isvara Pranidhana, surrendering to God. It sounds harsh. Surrender to God. Like, it's not like that. You don't even have to really believe in God of any sort. That's not a requirement, of course. But it's more like devotion and service. It's being devoted to these changes. It's being devoted to being a better person. And of course, service, acts of service, that is something that we should always be doing no matter if we believe in God or not. And it comes into this self-discipline type of thing, doing the right thing, even if there's no real reward. These are the yamas and the niyamas. They're basically like our ethics, our morals, our integrity, that type of stuff. And I'd love to go into more detail about those at another time. I would love to do a whole class on these. It's like, I keep saying that, but like all of these will have their own classes where I will go so much deeper into it because I could talk forever about it. And I'm trying to like limit myself on what I say because I will just talk and I'll feel terrible about it. All right, so we have another 5-minute journal quick write. So go ahead and grab your pens and papers, grab your timer, set 5 minutes. And this is your prompt. How can you honor the yamas and niyamas in your everyday life? So you don't have to pick all of them, or you don't have to pick one of them. You could do either or you could just generalize how you can add these things into your life. Or if you already do some of these things in your life, if this is something that you already focus on. So like I said, you could focus on one specific yama or niyama, or you could focus on them as a whole, on how to incorporate into your life, and just like, you know, write what comes to your mind. You don't need to think. It's only for you, for your personal development and Svadyaya. And if you choose to participate in this, you can pause me while your timer goes and then come join me back when you're done. If you're not interested in doing this, then let's move on to the next subject. Subtle body exploration. You're probably like, what does that mean? Well, let's get into it. The subtle body is an abstract way of looking at our bodies. It includes different body layers, energy locks, channels, and meridians. It is not like what we see in anatomy. So that's where our gross body comes in, like our muscles and bones, it's the gross body. The subtle body is a matter of personal belief, and it varies greatly person to person based on their religious beliefs, and it's different in each region. So like China and India have different beliefs on the subtle body, obviously. So the first one that we're going to cover is the chakras. The chakras are a spiritual or energy center of the body. Imagine a swirling wheel of energy, each one a different color depending on where the chakra is located. Each chakra has its own color, sound, and affirmation. Many schools of yoga believe that having a blocked chakra stops the flow of energy throughout the body and leads to illness or injury. The chakras hold the subtle frequencies of our subconscious, so when they become blocked, we feel tight or anxious feeling along the channel extending from this affected area. As we become aware of this energy, we can use the power of our consciousness coupled with different practices to heal and balance our chakras. Oh, so much. So like I was saying earlier with that everything in the universe is made of a vibration, and that the ultimate vibration, created the universe, but that everything is made of it. So it's the same with the chakras. Each one has its own vibration and its own sound, because sound is vibration. And these vibrations essentially make us work. Interesting. So these are the chakras themselves. The first one is the crown, or Sahasrara. It's hard to say, Sahasrara. So the sound for this one is like the original Om. Om, when you say it in a chant, it goes out to an N. Om, like it ends weird. Basically, that's the sound. Om, and it means I understand. That's the affirmation behind it. It is like our connection to spirituality. So it's here and it faces up towards the divine. So that's our connection to the divine. That chakra connects to them. The next one is our third eye, Ajna. It is Om. So just Om. That doesn't have to get fancy. No Om, no, just Om. And the affirmation for that is I know. It is our ability to see the big picture. So a lot of people think third eye, it's psychic and stuff. It's just our ability to see the big picture, to see beyond ourselves and our own problems and everything. It's just literally seeing, it's all seeing eye, it's seeing everything. The next one is throat, Vishuddha. Yam is the sound, Yam. And the affirmation is I speak. Vishuddha is our ability to communicate. It comes from our throat, obviously. So that's why they say if your throat chakra is off, your throat will feel tight. Or not necessarily you just feel tight, but you feel like you can't speak your mind or that you can't say what you want to say, type of thing. The next one is heart or anahata. The sound for that is hum, hum. And the affirmation for that is I love. It is our heart. It is our love center, our heart. And it is our ability to love. So that all comes from our heart center. So if you feel blocked off from love, you just don't love anything, you just hate everything, maybe you're having issues with your heart chakra. The next one is solar plexus or the manipura. And that's like our belly button area. The sound for that is ram. And the affirmation is I can. And the manipura is our confidence and control in ourselves. So that's where that comes from. And what does that mean? If you feel, so say your solar plexus chakra is blocked. You may feel very inconfident in your everyday life. You may feel not confident in yourself. Maybe you don't feel confident in your looks or how you sound or in your career path or like in anything in life. You may feel tight in your stomach. You may have GI issues, type of thing. The next one is our sacral chakra or Svadhisthana. Svadhisthana. The sound for that is vam, and our affirmation is I feel. And Svadhisthana is our connection to others and our ability to accept new experiences. So if this chakra is blocked, you may not feel very connected to other people. You may feel like you don't have any friends or anyone around you, or you don't personally feel like you would care if something happened to somebody else. And it doesn't even feel that extreme, just you don't feel connected to other people, but you also have a hard time with new experiences. Understandably, I have a hard time with new experiences. I'm autistic. I have a very difficult time with new experiences all the time. And maybe it's because, my sacral chakra is blocked. The next one is our root chakra or our Mudalahara. Mudalahara, it's a fun word. The sound for that is lam. And the affirmation is I am. It is our foundation or us being grounded. It's our root. It's our root to the earth. So to go just generally over these chakras, here's a little exercise. This could work with any chakra. If you feel one of us blocked and you want to work on it, it's not going to immediately unblock it, but it could help. You sit in meditation and you close your eyes and you imagine a huge glowing light around you, surrounding you in the color that you're trying to work on. So I have issues with my sacral chakra. I will surround myself in orange light, close my eyes, practice my pranayama, breathing in and out evenly, staying calm, and single pointed focus onto the color orange. And at this point, you could choose to say an affirmation, I feel that you feel. You can even connect it to a feeling you're currently having in order to fully, I feel uneasy about going somewhere new. I feel uneasy, or I feel at rest. I feel nervous. I feel like I can't do this, type of thing. Or you could choose to say vam over and over again, like a mantra. Vam, vam, vam. You can even combine between the two. And you could do that with any of those chakras. It is a great exercise. There are also yoga poses that you could do that people say, I don't know, because once again, yoga asana is a newer practice. We'll go over that for later. But I very much believe in sitting in meditation and doing this. You can sit in meditation and go through each one if you want to align them, or you just want to feel each one or just see how it feels. You can take some time, changing the color that you're envisioning, moving on. You can even picture, maybe not right away, do one at a time, but maybe you can focus on starting at the head. I see purple, a purple ball on my head, Sahasrara, I understand. and then moving on. You can call it like a chakra meditation, you know, and then, okay, I see the blue light here in between on my forehead. Om Anjna, I know, so that you're connecting your body to the subtle body type of thing. So now let's get into the bandhas. Bandhas are energy locks within the body. It is said mastering these locks mean you have mastered your yoga practice and can make poses feel more accessible and feel like you're floating in and out of the poses. There are 3 bandhas, the Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, and Jalandhara Bandha. Jalandhara Bandha. When you engage all 3 at once, it's called Mahabandha. So the idea when you're doing your yoga asana is to activate these bandhas, or to attempt to. You can't always do it, obviously. So the first one is the Mula Bandha. It is also called the root lock. It is in the pelvic floor. So people with vaginas, you know what a Kegel is usually. I mean, it's pretty well spread around vagina owners. What a Kegel is, that's activating your Mula Bandha. Acting like you have to hold, like you got to go to the bathroom, holding your urine in. That's activating that root lock. People without vaginas, you may not know what a Kegel is or understand that feeling. And honestly, I don't know if that feeling is the same for you, but it's basically tightening that area in between your butt and your genitals in like the most PG way that I could put it. It's just holding that and tightening that in. Now, here's the hard part. They say that you should hold that throughout your entire yoga practice. So when they say yoga practice, once again, this does not just mean asana. Yes, it is a huge thing to do in asana now because it helps with flowing in and out of poses and stuff. But even if you're sitting in meditation, you can do this as well, or stuff like that. The next one is Uddiyana Bandha. It's a diaphragm lock. It resides near the bottom of your diaphragm. Let me just, whoop, like underneath your diaphragm, underneath your rib cage. And it's like locking that area. It feels like strong suction. Okay, so you can do this while sitting. Spread your legs a little bit. Nice bend in your legs if you're sitting in a chair. If you're not sitting like you're sitting on the floor, you can stand up to do this. Bend in your legs, slightly bend over. Exhale all your air out. Keep your air out. Obviously, I'm not doing that because I'm talking, but you know, keep all your air out. And then like you're trying to look like cute in your bathing suit at the beach, like sucking in. You're going to suck in towards your diaphragm. The low belly up and back towards the spine and your low ribs. That's Uddiyana Bandha. It feels crazy. So try doing that while also activating some Kegels. Oh, it feels weird, right? And it hurts a little bit. Ow. To release the lock, let go of suctioning your tummy in, breathe in through your nose, and then stand up after you do all that. The next one, Jalandhara Bandha. It is your throat lock. It is located in the throat, hence throat lock, and it can trigger mental relaxation and anger relief. So how do we do this? We're going to bring our hands onto our knees, like Meg the Stallion says, hands on our knees. Breathe in through your nose. Bring your chin down to your chest, like you're trying to give yourself a double chin. Then you're going to push your hands into your knees and like you're pushing your knees away, and your back's going to open up. And you're going to try to dip your chin deeper, deeper, and deeper, and deeper, and deeper, and deeper. You're going to start to feel a strong suction in your throat. And to release, slowly come back forward. Breathe in slowly and lift your chin up slowly. And that's how you would do a throat lock. Now, Mahabandha, when you do all 3 at once. I know that sounds crazy, right? You do not have to start off doing that in your practice. This is something that you would like to obtain in your personal practice. You start one at a time, and then maybe you try to bring them all together at some point. But you should definitely master each one individually before you try to bring them all together, because that is a lot to do all at once in your poor body. So now we're going to get into the koshas. In yoga and other ancient traditions, it is believed that we do not just have one body, but that we are made up of 5 bodies, each related to a specific process of our being. So imagine like a Russian doll, how each one is nestled inside of the other. This is how our 5 bodies would be contained inside of us. So I picked this graphic because I feel like it perfectly embodied like the whole Russian doll aspect of it and how it would be. But each one is within the other one. So the first one is the Annamaya Kosha. This is our physical body. So this is our outside body, physical, our gross body, you would say. It is composed of flesh and bone. The next one is Pranamaya Kosha. It is our vital body. It is the sheath that is composed of our life force or prana. So within our physical body is our prana body, the one that helps us breathe and move that breath throughout the body. The next one is the Manomaya Kosha, or the intellectual mind. It holds the mind or manas and interprets our sensory experience. So it's basically like our brain. And of course, all of the sensory things that we feel, but that's what it holds, our mind and our sensory experiences, and interprets them for us. Vijnanamaya Kosha, that's our personality. So I guess you could say this is where the gunas go. It holds higher functions of intelligence and understanding. So our Manomaya Kosha holds our mind, but it mostly just interprets sensory experiences. It's just a very surface level mind. And then the Vijnanamaya Kosha holds the higher functions of our actual intelligence. It holds our personality. It holds our understandings of things and being and everything. And then there's the Anandamaya Kosha, which is our heart center. It's composed of bliss. At this level, we feel, participate, and radiate in bliss. This is the essential nature of the divine. So like if you think about it in a way, Anandamaya Kosha is the part of us that holds the divine. So when we say namaste to each other, the divine in me sees the divine in you. That's where we're seeing our Anandamaya Kosha. Right, into the 3 main channels. I know this is going through these terms super quickly. This is just a brief overview of some of the things. You are more than welcome to do further research on your own, but like I said, I will be doing more classes on each of the things, but like their own class to focus solely on that. So the 3 main channels in our Pranamaya Kosha body, so our prana body, with our breath and life force, we have nadis, which are cylindrical tubes that stretch throughout us like branches. So think of it this way. Our Pranamaya Kosha body is like our circulatory system, because our circulatory system is spreading oxygenated blood throughout our body. Oxygen is prana. It's our life force. It's our breath. If that's a nice, easier way for you to understand. They carry our prana or life force energy and information to help optimize our systems. It is believed that there are 72,000 nadis that originate from the heart chakra. And in yoga, there are 3 main channels for these nadis. Ida and Pingala represent the duality of life. They run along the spine on either side of the central channel called Sushumna. These channels directly affect the balance of our minds, and it is our goal to bring balance to both sides. Ida and Pingala are reactive to the outside world, while Sushumna is not. No matter what happens on the outside, Sushumna is our space that is never touched or disturbed by these outside situations. So Ida and Pingala, there are 2 sides. They are the main channels. They are constantly affected by life, and things could happen to them. They can get blocked, this and that, and the other thing. Sushumna does not. It has nothing to do with the outside world. That is like our inner being, innermost everything, and it is always safe from the outside world. So Ida and Pingala. But before we get into Ida and Pingala, earlier we talked about duality in life. This is part of the duality. And we're going to go over it a little bit more now. So this is our duality. Ida is my left side. I don't know if on the camera it's also my left side, but this is my left. It is. Okay. How I see it, I'm still left. It's our left side of our body. That is where that channel is situated mostly. They don't want to be confusing. Ida and Pingala curve around Sushumna, but they originate on the left side. So that's what it means by the left side. It is feminine. colors are white, cool, moon, consciousness, intuition, parasympathetic nervous system. These are some things that go with Ida. We'll go over that in a minute once we get over Pingala. So Pingala is my right side. It is masculine. Red is the color that comes to mind with Pingala. It's warm. The sun, vital power, rationality, and the sympathetic nervous system. So if you notice, looking at these two things, these are exact opposites of each other. This is the duality in our body, in our life, in nature. There's always duality. There is duality within ourselves. You've probably heard of people say that there are the feminine and the masculine within everybody. And this is what this kind of means. There is feminine and masculinity in everybody. It's just how there is. There are two sides. Some people, yes, obviously have problems with hyper femininity and hyper masculinity. Those people are obviously unbalanced in their Ida and Pingalas. So when it comes down to color, it's not really like color. It's just like that's not what the colors that they are, but it's just like color has meaning to it. So like white is like a cool color and red is a warm color, and then cool and warm type thing. Like it's just the duality of our nature and what it means. So the first four, the red, warm, sun, white, cool, moon, those are more metaphorical. It's just a connection to those things. So when it comes to consciousness and vital power, so when it comes to vital power and consciousness, it's the side of us and the duality that holds each thing. So consciousness is our consciousness, but it's also like our conscience and our want to be good, which is seen as a feminine behavior. And power is seen as a masculine behavior, that they want power. And there needs to be a way to find the middle between both of those. So if you are heavily imbalanced and you have maybe issues with Ida, maybe you have power issues. Maybe you're having some blockages on the Pingala side, so you're overly conscious about everything, and you like are worrying about perfection type stuff. Then we'll move on to intuition versus rationality. So your feminine side is very intuitive. Women are meant to be intuitive. Femininity is being intuitive, and men are seen as more rational. Women are seen as, led by emotions, but really we're led by intuition, which can be seen as emotion. So again, if one or the other is kind of out of whack, maybe you have issues with trusting your intuition. Maybe you have issues with being rational about decisions or stuff like that. So then parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. I went to nursing school, so I understand this a bit. So if you didn't go to nursing school, I have a little definition that I'm going to explain to you about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system controls our fight or flight response. So Pingala controls our fight or flight response. Parasympathetic is our rest and digest. So the duality of parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is again our fight or flight response. So if you're in a fight or flight mode, obviously something's happening and you're shaken up and you feel like you got to fix something, which sometimes happens to us even though there's nothing wrong. Our brain just goes into fight or flight mode over nothing, over stress, over little things. And our parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest. So it brings us to a state of calm. It's the exact opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. And we should have a healthy balance of both. Obviously, if you need to go into fight or flight mode, you need to protect yourself or to run away, we need that. But you also need to relax and rest and allow your body to digest everything and just be at a calm state of mind. So if your Pingala is out of whack, you may be having hypermasculinity issues. You may get too warm. You may have issues with power imbalances in your life, meaning you feel like either you need to be in power of everything. Nobody else can have any decisions. It has to be only what I want. Maybe I'm rational and you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you're having issues with your rationality. And then you feel like you're always in flight or fight mode. And then there's the Ida. Your femininity is just, you're hyper feminine. You don't feel any masculinity, which is completely okay. Once again, we're humans having a human response. You know, maybe you're cold all the time, which is a thing a lot of women deal with. And yeah, it's dealing with our consciousness, being able to be conscious of ourselves. Maybe we're over conscious, over worried about everything, you know, and that is a very big deal, a very big issue for a lot of people, being constantly overly conscious about themselves. And maybe our intuition's off. Maybe we struggle with trusting our intuition. And then the parasympathetic nervous system. Maybe something bad happens to us and we don't care. We don't do nothing. We just sit there. Okay, whatever. I'm relaxed. That's also bad. Being in fight or flight all the time is bad, but not having any flight or flight reaction is also very bad, because it's a necessary part of our survival. So enough about Ida and Pingala. We're moving on to the 5 Vayus. Vayu means wind or force, as in the forces of life that keep us going. Yoga tradition describes 5 main movements and functions of the prana, known as the Vayus. They are in charge of the different areas in the body and their functions. So prana Vayu is our head, chest, and our third eye. Its functions deal with our intake, so like eating, and also breathing. Inspiration, so like getting inspiration, that's also an intake. If you think about it in a way, you see something you really like and you intake it and you like it, and it inspires you to do something similar or something totally different, you know. It flows inwards and downwards, so like breathing in or eating, any sort of intake, it comes in and goes down. In charge of reception from air, food, impression, and ideas. Sorry, probably should have clicked that before I went on. Apana Vayu is our pelvic floor and our lower abdomen. A main function is elimination and nourishing the organs of digestion and reproduction. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's nothing super crazy about it. It governs elimination from our body. Next is Samana Vayu, which is in our navel. It aids in digestion of all things, such as food, air, experiences, emotion, and thoughts. That's just digestion in general of everything. Pretty self-explanatory. Udana Vayu. It's in our throat. It deals with growth, speech, and expression. It has an upward flow, because when we talk, it comes out of our mouth. Vyana Vayu is in our heart, in our lungs, so inside of us, but it flows through our whole body. It deals with circulation on all levels. So like I said earlier, how prana and pranayama, you know, it has to do with life force, and there's branches. It's basically, if you think about it scientifically, it is our circulatory system. And the Vyana Vayu is our circulatory system further in more detail. So let's get into some sticky things that some people don't like to talk about. Colonization of India and cultural appropriation. So colonization in yoga. British rule began in 1773, and at that time they banned wandering yogis and attempted to institute and promote more acceptable religious practices among the Indian people. So before British rule came to India, obviously they were free to practice their own culture and their own cultural expressions. Yoga and yogis were seen as something completely different. Specifically, wandering yogis, how do I explain this? Wandering yogis were yogis that wandered. They could be seen as violent. They were violent enough that they actually kept off British rule and fought against the British for a very long time. And that's part of the reason why they started to ban them, because they were trying to colonize India and that was stopping them. And their belief system was making it harder to colonize these people. Anytime colonization comes into play, things that are not considered white enough, they take it away. They don't want you to do that. They are trying to make you normal in their eyes. So wandering yogis, they were considered violent, inhumane, because they were doing some things that maybe were questionable, but it's what they believed in, and there was nothing wrong with it for themselves. They were doing it, but the British did not like it. So they banned a lot of it and started to take away their religious practices, which I would love to go more into detail about that later. Around the 18th and the 19th century, after a long time of ruling over them, Britain started to loosen their policies on the native culture of India and allowed a renewed form of traditional yoga. This new form of yoga was a combination of bodybuilding, gymnastics, military calisthenics, and hatha yoga practices that were deemed acceptable. Because it was combined with a few acceptable yoga practices and had the label yoga on it, it was seen as a part of the cultural heritage of India. Now, this is very important. This whole paragraph is super important. They banned traditional yoga because it was seen as not white enough. It was not normal. It was not acceptable to the white way of life, to the colonized way of life. When they started to bring it back, they were trying to reconcile with India. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but they were trying to improve relations with India. So they were like, here, we're going to give you back some of your culture. We're going to make it okay again. See, it's okay. Like, we're not terrible type of thing, even though they had denied it from them for hundreds of years. But they didn't just give it back. They changed it. In Western culture at the time, physical fitness, which I mean, it still kind of is, physical fitness was seen as number one, was most important. So they wanted the people of India to adhere to this Western culture, and they wanted them to do what they wanted them to do. Essentially, they were trying to force them to do what they wanted. So they said, hey, here's yoga again, but here's some extra steps, you know, some asana, some movement. And because they put in some hatha yoga practices, they accepted it, obviously, and started practicing it. Now we're going to get into modern postural yoga. Modern postural yoga was created in direct opposition of what yoga traditionally was and was created by a colonial empire. We cannot separate it from colonialism. Modern postural yoga is only around 100 years old, including most of the poses we practice today. For example, sun salutation, which is very well known. It is known as one of the first things that you really learn when you do yoga, and it's used in a lot of asanas. It was created in the 1930s, as well as were a lot of other yoga poses. I just didn't go into detail on every single one. The use of Sanskrit in these poses are intentional to make it seem as if though it is part of the traditional culture of yoga. So in the previous slide, we talked about how they combined a lot of things. This is what modern postural yoga is. It was when Britain combined calisthenics, gymnastics, aerobics with a few yoga traditions. This is what modern postural yoga is. It was completely created by Britain and other colonial powers. And they used Sanskrit names, not because that's what they were called, but because they wanted it to seem more authentic. Historical texts do speak of asana, but there were very few, and the focus was on seated poses instead of the more gymnastic aerobic style we know now. So like I've said before, when asana is mentioned in the Yoga Sutras, it is not this modern postural yoga. It is not sun salutation. It is none of that. It is mostly seated poses that were meant to help keep us still and comfortable while in meditation. Modern yoga heavily lacks meditative and spiritual practices, which were essential to traditional yoga. So while yes, some yoga practices and some yoga studios, some yoga teachers heavily put in meditation and the spiritual practices, it is more common than not to focus solely on the postural part of yoga while instituting a few hatha yoga inspirations. So now we're going to talk about some cultural appropriation versus appreciation. We must treat this sacred tradition with humility and respect. To be able to learn and practice yoga is absolutely a privilege and an honor. I want you to think back to the fact that Indian people were not allowed to practice their own tradition and had it taken from them. And then the colonial powers changed it completely before allowing them to start doing it again. Those people did not have the privilege to partake in their own culture. And that is not okay. And it is further not okay for white people to claim it as their own culture or to claim that they brought it to America or that they created it or any of the above. And if you think, girl, you're crazy, no one's ever done that, I would like you to think of Gwyneth Paltrow, who said that she brought yoga to America and made it popular. That is appropriation, and it is not okay. It is not our practice to change or take credit for it in any way, and we cannot ignore or erase the history of yoga. So by practicing yoga, you're not necessarily culturally appropriating, but if you are insisting that you created this or that you want to change it in some way to make it better, you can't. It is a traditional practice that has basis in things and you have to adhere to it. Taking the time to fully understand the entirety of yoga, including the colonization of India and yoga itself, because yoga is a colonized practice at this point, you are better able to fully appreciate this beautiful practice in ancient tradition. By participating in modern postural yoga, we are participating in the further colonization of a cultural practice and should be respectful of its origins. So this is where people don't like it. They don't like to hear that they're culturally appropriating. And it can be hard for people because even I want to be like, but I like it. How am I appropriating? It's something that I truly believe. It's okay that I truly believe it. But until I fully understood where this came from, I was appropriating it 100%. And that's something that we have to acknowledge because it's Svadyaya and we're working on ourselves and working on the fact that we make mistakes. We have to acknowledge them and we have to fix them. I did not understand where yoga came from. I did not know that modern postural yoga was not anything to do with ancient traditional yoga. I really thought at one point in my yoga career, my yoga practice, that doing sun salutations was something that Buddha was doing. It's not. You know, it was made in the 1930s. There's no way that they were doing that. I didn't understand fully what yoga was. And learning what yoga really was is a way to appreciate that culture. Even if you don't necessarily want to participate in that aspect of yoga and you would like to enjoy the modern postural yoga, that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person, but you should understand where it came from and you should be respectful of its origins. If you want to practice modern postural yoga, that's completely okay. You don't have to do any part of the spiritual practice. It's not a necessity. But you do need to be respectful of its origins. You need to be respectful of the culture that it comes from. You have to be respectful of the religion and of the people that this comes from. 100%. If you don't and you are disrespectful to them, you're just appropriating a culture for your own personal gain, and that's not okay. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, and it can be hard to hear. And people want to make fun of cultural appropriation and be like, we're all one people. Yes, but not all of us went through colonization. Not all of us dealt with, being told we can't practice our own culture. We all have our own cultures. And yes, it's nice to share and to partake in a shared cultural exchange, but there becomes a point where it's no longer a shared cultural exchange and it's just taking and it's just using, So here is a couple of textbook definitions. Cultural appropriation: the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, etc. of one people or society by members of another, and typically it's the more dominant people or society. Cultural appreciation: appreciating another culture in an effort to broaden their perspectives and to connect with others cross-culturally, while also emphasizing that you are not an authority and avoiding taking space for members of that culture. one more quick write before we finish up this lecture. Has your personal view of yoga changed? If it has, in what way? So go ahead and set your timers. And you can take this as literally or as literally and literally as you want. But has this lecture changed your view on what not only yoga is or where it came from, but how you feel about it personally? So feel free to flesh that out as much as you want in your 5 minutes. If you have no interest in doing that, that's fine. But maybe you should think about it in your head, Svadyaya, and we'll move on to the next one. When you're ready, just press play, okay? So what is yoga? Yoga is a beautiful and ancient spiritual practice in part. Partly, it is also the modern postural exercise that we now know. Yes, it is possible to practice both aspects while appreciating and respecting the culture that it comes from. So, yes, you can enjoy both bits of yoga. You can enjoy this ancient spiritual practice and you can enjoy just the plain modern postural part. You can enjoy them together. I still love modern postural yoga. Like I said, it's a great exercise. It feels great in your body and it does make people happier. Of course it does. Exercise is meant to make you happy. It releases endorphins. So of course you're going to be happy doing yoga, doing any sort of exercise. But yes, you can do this while appreciating the culture that it comes from and appreciating the people who created it. So I'm gonna move this, sorry, that's in the way. Any questions or looking to discuss what you learned today? I'm going to take a moment here to state very clearly and openly, because I feel like boundaries need to be approached with a subject like cultural appropriation, because I know some people, their egos will feel hit and they'll feel a need to project that feeling onto me. I will not entertain any sort of argument or discussion on how you can't culturally appropriate. That is not something that is going to happen. And I'm very sorry if that upsets you, but maybe I'm not the teacher for you then. If you would like to honestly discuss cultural appropriation and how to limit your appropriation of the culture or how to further appreciate it, I would love to speak about that. But I will not entertain any discussions that cultural appropriation does not exist, because it very clearly does. I will not entertain any sort of discussion or argument that colonization is good, that it should happen, or that it didn't happen. None of those things. This is not a debate forum for that type of stuff, okay? Just want to make that very clear. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh. And this is not meant for the majority of people, but for the few people that will feel the need to fill my inbox with anger, I'm not going to respond. I will probably end up blocking you. And I'm very sorry if that comes to be, but I do have very strict boundaries for myself. Okay? Now that we've gotten that out of the way, sorry about my little face in the way. Please reach out to me, any of the ways below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you want to take a postural yoga class or a meditation session, I have both of those on my website in my class library. If you know anything about me and my website, if you've already joined the membership and this is how you're watching this class, awesome. You can take any classes you want anytime, all for one price. If you don't join the membership and you don't want to, that's okay, but you can buy classes one per class. You can keep the class forever to take as many times as you want. You don't have to keep paying for it to take it again. It's just the one time and you get to have access to it forever. So thank you for your time. I hope this was informative to you. And like I've said multiple times throughout this, I will have more classes like this coming soon. I don't know when. I have meditation classes to do. I have postural classes to do. And these take a lot of time because it's a lot of research and combining information together. But I'm hoping to have another one like this very soon. So here is some of my information, my Instagram, my Facebook, my email, and then this is the website. You can DM me on my Instagram, you can DM me on Facebook, you can just send me an email. And if you'd like to read more about just me or the yoga studio, check it out. That is the yoga website. Thank you for watching. If you would like to stay with me for one more moment, I would like to do a closing meditation together. Again, just a quick short one. And then we'll end with one communal breath together and a nice namaste if that calls to you. You do not have to feel required to do any of this. If you're done, you can exit. It's all good. If you would like to stay, I'd like to do that with you. We're going to do a little different than we started. We're going to do a chanting meditation. So go ahead and feel free to close your eyes, find a comfortable seat, you can cross your legs, you can sit however you want. Close your eyes or leave them open, whatever calls to you. And we're going to have an Om together. And I want you to keep it going as long as you can. If we were in person, I'd probably do it a little bit differently, but just keep it going as long as you can without inhaling. So we're going to inhale and exhale to clear the air. And then we'll inhale one time through the nose, and our exhale will be us saying Om, essentially. Okay, so inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, inhale through the nose. Om. Inhale to catch your breath. One more exhale. Now we're going to inhale and exhale together for one communal breath. Inhale to clear the air. Exhale. Breathe through the nose. Hold at the top. Exhale through the mouth. Hold at the bottom. Resume normal breathing. Thank you very much for following along with this lecture. I'm very sorry if some parts made you uncomfortable, but like we've learned, maybe that means there needs to be some self-study and realization of why we feel that way and work through that over time. Thank you very much. Namaste.